Hello the world, hello the internet, hello Jason Isaacs, hello people who are interested in Islam, and people who have hopefully seen my first video on the intro to ideologies. We're going to push straight off with a look at conservatism. This is where we choose to start it, and no further ado, let's just crack on. Now, when we're looking at these ideologies, I always find that it helps to put them into context, and the context that we need to consider when we're looking at conservatism is the French Revolution. And particularly the problem with big ideas. Now, those of you who've studied a little bit of history will know that the French Revolution was driven by big ideas, specifically liberté, égalité, fraternité. We'd had our own revolution 100 years previously. It hadn't been quite so dramatic as that in France. But, we got rid of a king and he'd been beheaded, and then we'd had a civil war and it had been really quite messy. But we'd emerged from that in a typical British way, having had this chaos that had been unleashed by the Civil War. We then sort of bundled our way through the Commonwealth into the Restoration, through Charles II into James II. He was terrible, and so rather than have another big etch-a-sketch moment and risk tossing everything out, we had this strange little period where he escaped and was captured, and we let him escape again, and eventually, look, why don't you just leave? And he did, and then we invited William and Mary across, and so we had this very, very British bodge as we sort of moved our way forwards through small steps towards a solution. So rather than having this big revolutionary moment with lots of beheadings, we moved gradually towards an odd bodge British state of affairs, constitutional monarch, blah 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 blah. Under that model, we've had a relatively peaceful transition of authority from one government to the next ever since. Obviously, largely on the mainland UK and mainland Britain. Obviously, in Ireland, things have been very, very different, stemming not least from the period that we're just talking about. But the critical thing here is that a book, Reflections on the Revolution in France, was written by Burke, Edmund Burke, looking back at France and saying, my God, I wonder there if the solution is not worse than the problem. Yes, there were certainly problems in France, but was the French Revolution in solving those problems making things significantly worse? So we have this British sense of wariness of big ideas because big ideas can create big problems. And that principle thinking flows all the way through conservative thinking. Driven first by human imperfection. Now, we're talking about a skepticism about the efficacy of big ideas. Any big idea is the product of the human brain, and all human brains, including my own, are limited. And so we have to start from that particular idea that the human capacity is finite. The individual human capacity is finite, and therefore you should never really embrace wholeheartedly the ideas of any one particular person or group of people, because the chances of them being right are not that high. However, if we look at society, organic society, as an almost relentless stream of individuals, then potentially you can see a situation whereby over time, through trial and error or heuristic process, we might come to a state of affairs, rather like Britain in the 17th century, that was better. So, we started off with the decapitation of Charles I, and then into the Civil War, then into the Commonwealth, then into the Restoration, then through the Glorious Revolution to the House of Hanover. So, all of that was it. Organic system. We very nearly blew it in the Civil War. Let's make that clear. So, we're looking back at the Civil War and we're thinking, my God, everything nearly went spectacularly wrong there. We've got to avoid doing that again. So let's proceed gradually and let's protect that organic society, because if organic society collapses, then all the accumulated wisdom, all of the accumulated experience, all of the stuff that we've spent hundreds and hundreds of years putting together is going to get tossed out, and you'll be right back to year zero. Rather chilling echo there of Cambodia under Pol Pot, where they literally did go back to year zero, and spoiler alert, didn't end well. So looking back at France and looking back at the way in which the revolution in France was driven by ideas and the way in which those ideas were implemented in such a way that it really challenged organic society, that society itself was about to fracture, and with it, correct the problems, but throwing out the baby with the bathwater, creating that situation where organic society dissolved completely and you're left with nothing. Hence, we reject big ideas and instead we embrace pragmatism. Again, think about that process by which we had the Civil War, all went terribly wrong, and then say, okay, let's not do that again. Let's just proceed gradually, small steps. Here we've got Charles II. Yeah, he's okay. Let's run with that. Jack, bit of a moron. Okay, let's get rid of him, but let's not do it in quite such a dramatic fashion as we did last time, and so on and so forth. But then bringing into that idea of paternalism, that if you've got this rather combustible organization of society whereby you've got big inequalities of wealth, and you've got people who are wealthy, and you've got people who are poor, you've got people who are powerful, and you've got people who are weak, people who are strong, and so on and so forth, then there is an expectation on those who are in charge to manage the shop effectively. And that was one of the reasons why James II was so royally disliked, because he was playing favourites, he wasn't looking after the whole society. So again, everything has its roots in history. And then again, on that, we have the idea of liberty, that people should be free to maximise their own well-being, their own economy, but within a particular model. And this really comes in later, in later editions of conservatism, but we'll park it in there just so we're all complete at this point, and perhaps come back to that later. Okay, now I mentioned earlier that at the heart of this is this sense of human imperfection, that all human brains are finite, that we are intellectually limited. So the way I like to talk about it is life, the universe, and everything, that's LUE, is infinite. The individual is clearly finite. And therefore, by operation of the human brain alone, there's no way that one individual could come up with all of the answers to life's problems. You're not going to sit down under a tree and have enlightenment drop on you. Oh, that's it. And people who claim that that's it are often deluded and usually wrong. So the idea there is that the individual is finite. Now, from that stems the next phase of this particular thing. Now, we are finite. The world, as we've explained, is infinite and terrifying. And so we will naturally be driven to seek the community of others in the same position. So because we're intellectually limited, we become psychologically dependent. We look to others to give us strength and refuge. So we come together naturally to build societies. Now remember that, because that's important later. So we're intellectually limited. We naturally seek the company of others in the same position. However, we are, again, intellectually limited and psychologically flawed. And so what that means is, even as we come together in these communities, we are driven by our own selfish short-term needs there's a proclivity to get things wrong. Let's put it that way. Our short-term gains will always overrule our better long-term interests. Now, some political commentators conclude from this that humans in the conservative model are bad or evil. And I don't think that's strictly true. I don't think that's fair. I think we have to say that we're flawed, and it's again a product of our intellectual shortcomings. We know what our long-term better interests are. They're to protect the group, protect society. But because we've got this crippling short-term present bias, if you will, we can't help but cheat and steal and swindle. It's not because we're evil, it's just because we're stupid. And I think if we accept that, then we're in a good position whereby we can say that, okay, the three particular parts of human imperfection that we need to focus on are intellectual limitation, psychologically dependent, and then this psychologically flawed, that we will always prioritize our short-term selfish gain over our own long-term better interest. And it's not because we're evil, it's just because we're stupid. We are, again, that psychological flaw is very, very important. So that's human imperfection. That's the first thing that we need to get our heads around, and that's very, very important. This then leads into organic society. Now, we need to get our heads around organic society as a number of different things. Well, first of all, the why. Well, we've kind of already explained that. The individual is limited, and so will seek the company of the wider society of others in the same position. Now, why is that a good thing? That's a good thing because while the individual is finite, if we have a limitless number of individuals, then effectively we have infinite reasoning capacity. So as long as organic society survives, as long as organic society can trundle on and continue to learn and evolve and adapt and accumulate wisdom, you've got to think of organic society as this repository of experience and wisdom and knowledge. I always use the metaphor of a dung beetle. You know, the dung beetle just pushing the dung along and it's growing all the time. That's really what organic society is like. We're saying that an individual cannot possibly solve all of the questions that life, the universe, and everything posits. However, an infinite stream of individuals might. And so that's where our organic society comes in. So it's that idea of society as a repository of knowledge. That's why tradition becomes very, very important for conservatives. It's like society as a refuge that, again, it's offering us this place where we can be comfortable and safe. However, we have to remember that our own short-term present bias, that rational but psychologically flawed element, leads us to leads us to make bad decisions when it comes to weighing up our immediate wants with our long-term better interests. So that's society. Society is a repository of knowledge. Society is refuge, but at the same time, a society that's constantly under threat by, even as we build it, even as those individuals come together, they will inadvertently be seeking to undermine its integrity. So let's talk a little bit about pragmatism. Again, we've explained how pragmatism relates to ideas. We are deeply skeptical of big ideas. However, we do know that everybody has some ideas and some people have more ideas and other people have better ideas. So skills, talents and abilities are not going to be distributed across the entire... Oh, have I missed a page here? What's going on here? Do apologize. Pragmatism. So there we go. So the central problem then was, for goodness sake, I think my computer's struggling to deal with everything I'm throwing at it at the moment. So pragmatism is the concept that we are skeptical of big ideas. And so rather than putting our faith in big abstract ideas like, equality or freedom, what instead we seek to do is to identify things that work. And I think I'm going to leave it at that once this thing finally gets itself. Yes, so life, the universe, and everything is infinite. The individual is finite. Society, as we've said, we cannot create solutions. Individuals cannot create solutions. Society over time might, but we have to watch out that big ideas lead to big mistakes. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Hayek and the road to serfdom in a little while. So what we do then is we protect the things that work and we recognize those through tradition. These are things that have stood the test of time. They work and we should respect those. And the things that don't work, well, we'll change those. So that's pragmatism. Now, remember when in the introduction we were looking at income inequality and the way in which for the socialists, the idea was that you had to change this because inequality was, just necessarily a bad thing. It was unfair. It was a principled stance. Whereas the one nationist would look at that and say, well, we're not necessarily bothered about inequality as an idea because individuals are different and they deserve different levels of reward. They have different levels of authority. What we can't have, however, is a situation whereby the income gap or the wealth distribution is so unfair that it presents to organic society. If that's the case, then we have to move. So pragmatism is about being driven by what matters rather than what big ideas you have got. And conservatives, as often says, it's the ideology that travels light because you don't travel with big ideas. Rather, you look for things that are working. You use the things that are working. You fix the things that are not working, and thereby make your progress through time. Now, I mentioned this earlier, and I do apologize for getting a little bit mixed up, but we do have an inevitable hierarchy. Skills, talents, and abilities are unevenly distributed. That leads to a hierarchy of talent. It's inevitable because that's the way it is. It's desirable because it's preferable for those. It's preferable to have the most able with the most responsible. It's preferable that the most able should have the most responsibility. So that's what we're looking for. We want that hierarchy with the most able at the top, so that they can dispense wisdom and recognize the well-being of society, recognize what works for society, and look after society responsibly. And that's that idea: with great power comes great responsibility. You need people at the top with vision to steer society. And it's a pragmatic response. It's not about saying, well, these people are royalty or the priests or whatever, therefore they should have power. It's not that at all. It's a pragmatic response. It's the idea that those at the power presumably have got there through their skills, talents, and abilities. We should recognize that and give those people the means to organize and steer society. So paternalism and hierarchy go hand in hand. We have this hierarchy. It makes sense that the people at the top are the most able, and the most able are therefore in the best position to steer society forwards. There is, however, a critical problem here, and this is a problem with progressivism and to a certain extent with libertarianism. The central problem here is that extreme complexity. Both society and the economy, in conservatism theory at least, are beyond effective planning. We can't manage them effectively. You can't sit down and plan all of society. It's just way too complex. This brings us back into the idea of what's pragmatic, what's practical. Go with what works, go with small steps, rather than saying, right, we're going to engineer equality or we're going to engineer freedom and see what happens. We've also talked about human nature and the nature of the state, that you're not going to get it right every time, and so we have to proceed with extreme caution and make sure that we're not over-promising and under-delivering. And that brings us into the enabling state, to the extent to which the state is in a position to help people to help themselves. Again, the conservative position here is very broadly skeptical, because the questions that we're looking at here, the complications, the sums are just incredibly complicated. And this road leads to a really nice argument, which I'm going to paraphrase in a second, by Hayek. It's called the road to serfdom. Hayek later produced all sorts of essays claiming he's not a conservative, but let's just have a look at what his argument is here. It's beautiful, by the way. So the state has a plan. We'll call that P1. P1 is introduced and P1 fails, because that's what plans do. Human nature, society, irreducibly complex. There's no way one plan could possibly come in and solve all of the problems that we have. The state, however, is going to be unwilling to accept responsibility for the failure of that plan, and so instead it projects that failure onto society. It says, look, there's nothing wrong with the plan. The plan was brilliant. It was you guys. You made a mess of it because you didn't follow our instructions. I don't know why you didn't do that, because what we're going to do now, we need more authority. We're going to claim more authority to impose our will on you, so that you follow our instructions more rigorously. And so the state acquires more authority. It comes up with a new plan. Here's P2. It implements plan 2. What do you think happens? That's right, P2 fails. Well, now why does P2 fail? Well, P2 fails because plans fail. It's what they do. However, of course, the state isn't going to accept that, because it's not going to it's not going to be willing to accept that its own plan was the reason why things failed. And so instead, it reclaims more power, and we get back into this vortex of increasing authoritarianism, or as Hayek called it, the road to serfdom. And hence we're skeptical of big ideas, we're skeptical of plans. We want to proceed incrementally, we want to proceed in small steps. We want individuals to be making those decisions, because big governments come in, they make big decisions, and that generally leads to bad things, certainly in the conservative dictum. And hence we like the idea of libertarianism. We like the idea of individuals sorting things out for themselves and thereby driving progress forward, rather than the government coming in with big plans that will inevitably fail. Right, that's my introduction to conservatism. And what we're going to get onto next is looking at the human condition, society, the economy, and the state through the prism of the various different ideologies that you need to know. The questions that are coming up will be, to what extent do conservatives agree on the human condition? To what extent does your ideology X agree on theme 1, for instance? So if we can go through this methodically, then you're going to be in a position to answer the questions that are coming at you, certainly from the EdXL board, I think also from the AQA board. But That's it from me for this particular section. I'll be back in a minute, or I'll be back shortly with my next incarnation when we're going to talk about traditional conservatism, that is the conservatism of Hobbes. Great. Thanks for your attention. Enjoy your politics, and see you very soon. Take care now. Bye.